As a traveler, I love an airport that's close in and accessible to the central city, but if you live in a city that has a close-in airport, it's really not a net positive. Traffic, air pollution, massive expanses of concrete, noise, of course, and maybe worst of all, they take up a whole lot of valuable urban acreage that could have been used for something else. So 10 US airports that just shouldn't exist, coming up next. This is CityNerd, weekly content on cities and transportation. Viewer suggested topics, always welcome. And this idea actually did come out of a discussion thread on my Patreon, which is a place where I do get lots of inspiration. First of all, let me just admit up front that I have made videos in the past that praise cities that do have fast transit connections to airports. And the cities that have airports that are closer in tend to do best in that kind of analysis. So consider this video kind of the flip side of that, or the dark underbelly of convenient airport location, if you prefer. So this is going to be a top 10 list, or I guess a bottom 10 list of airports that waste extremely valuable urban space and manage to inflict all the worst airport-related externalities on close-in neighborhoods. You could say the airports that are on this list are all candidates to get redeveloped, and you can kind of ponder that as we go through the list, but citing a new airport is a pretty heavy lift, so in most cases, just don't get your hopes up. Although it's not as if there's no precedent. At 9:39 p.m. on February 27th, 1995, the last flight cleared the runway at Denver's Stapleton Airport, and Denver International Airport opened 1 minute after midnight the next day. Redevelopment of Stapleton? Still a work in progress. Okay, so here's what I did. I looked at 4 things. I looked at the size of the airport itself in acres. I looked at the prevailing rent per square foot for neighborhoods adjacent to the airport, and keep in mind, the airport itself depresses these values. I'm not going to try to make any representation about what would happen if you converted an enormous airport parcel into mixed use and lifted all the height restrictions that are in play around airports. You can make your own guesses. For this, I did use the great data set I got from the folks at Dwellsy, which lets me really dig into the rental data by zip code, and thanks again to Dwellsy for that. The other 2 data points I used were network distance to city center and the size of the urbanized area, under the philosophy that the larger a city is, the more important it is to make efficient use of close-in land. Threshold criteria, I really wanted airports that are literally in the core city, or at least look like they should be in the core city. So everything that made this list is 7 miles or closer. Also, I didn't want to look at every airfield in every small town, so I just took the list of 64 US airports that are considered large or medium hubs, and I did keep this list to US since I was relying on the Dwellsy data set I have, which is US zip codes only. Okay, I think I've given you enough information to make this one kind of fun to guess along with, so let's get into it. Number 10, Las Vegas Harry Reid International. In a way, this one is much worse than the number 10 ranking indicates. I measured to downtown, but most people flying into Harry Reid are bound for somewhere much closer to the airport. And one of the supposed advantages of having a close-in airport is having super convenient transportation connections into the city, and this airport just absolutely fails on this count. So my idea, instead of building huge sprawling subdivisions out at the edge of the Las Vegas Valley, put a big ol' international airport there and redevelop the existing airport. Oh, and build some trains while you're at it. Number 9, Honolulu. Look, I understand it's important to have a big airport here because of how much tourism there is, and it is a hub for flights to the other islands, but maybe there should be less tourism and more housing. I don't know, it's not my place to say, and options for siting airports on volcanic islands are limited, but it has to be said, Daniel K. Inouye International Airport does take up a lot of prime oceanfront land. Number 8, Palm Beach International. This one was tough to assess because it is in the Miami metro area, but I treated it as if it serves the Palm Beach urbanized area, which it kind of does, and I called West Palm Beach the central city. It's pretty valuable land, Atlantic Ocean adjacent, and you do wonder why it couldn't be sited further inland. I'm sure there are important hydrological reasons, but everywhere in South Florida is bad for that. Speaking of which, number 7 is Miami International. A little further inland, but still a really valuable large parcel, and you could extend the Metrorail Orange Line straight into it. I honestly don't even know where you would build a different Miami airport. Maybe just get rid of it and fix Brightline so it's grade separated all the way to the Fort Lauderdale airport, which, by the way, just misses this list. And then extend Brightline to Atlanta. You could take a lot of planes out of the air. Number 6 is LaGuardia Airport in Queens. This one was a little tough to figure because it's such an odd location and there's no subway access, so the prevailing rents aren't as high as you might think. Would you have to relocate LaGuardia? I don't know. You've got 2 other major international airports, and you've got Westchester and Long Island MacArthur. I say just bulldoze LaGuardia and use all the tax receipts from redevelopment to pay for high-speed rail to replace the hundreds of daily flights that are currently going to all the cities that people should be taking trains to in the first place. Number 5, San Jose Mineta Airport. This is one I love flying into because it is so convenient, but just look at where it's situated. Totally ridiculous. Dead center of, I believe, our nation's most expensive metro area. And you might say, well, that's all runways and taxiways and open space right now. It would just be way expensive to put in all the infrastructure you'd need to create new neighborhoods. Well, say you could densify without all the airport-related height restrictions and get like 50,000 more people in this space, and compare that to the way we usually add 50,000 people to a metro area and the kind of infrastructure we have to build to do that. That's basically the argument for urbanism in a nutshell. Number 4, Phoenix Sky Harbor. A bit of a weird one since most of the Phoenix metro area looks about the same whether you're a mile from downtown or 15 miles, but let's just assume Phoenix got urbanism pilled and wanted to redevelop and densify a massive 3,400-acre parcel close into the city. They decide to relocate their airport 26 miles from downtown, which is currently what they do with their Amtrak station. You think I'm joking, but this redevelopment scenario is probably no less realistic than any of the other ones on this list. Okay, if you've been playing along, you might have some pretty good guesses about the top 3, and let me know down in the comments if you actually got all 3 in the correct order. Honor system. I know you're all trustworthy. But before we get there, quick reminder to click on all the things that make the algo happy if you want to inflict this content on a new and unsuspecting audience. And all the usual ways to connect on the various apps, and do consider supporting directly on Patreon. I don't have any honorables or dishonorables for this, just an observation that a lot of what makes doing things like relocating and redeveloping airports so hard, or any other big planning problem for that matter, is people have a tangible and emotional attachment to just stuff that's already there. Even if it's a close-in airport that inflicts all kinds of terrible externalities on the city they live in. Conversely, people have no emotional attachment to the things that could exist in the future that they might care about deeply, but they just don't know because those things haven't been built yet. Like number 3, DC National. It's really hard to imagine the city without National Airport being there, but imagine what you could do with this valuable chunk of land if you could replace all the flights with high-speed rail trips up and down the East Coast and out to the Midwest, or move the flights you actually need to Dulles or BWI. Number 2, San Diego International. Clearly the best possible use of 633 acres of prime ocean-adjacent land close into the downtown of purportedly the best weather city in the US, and a city that has serious housing affordability issues. To be honest, if I go on eye test alone, this is probably number 1, but I'm a data person. The airport footprint is pretty small compared to others on this list. It's just one runway. It is terrible, but my number 1 is number 1 by a pretty healthy margin, and it's Boston Logan. This is another one that's pretty convenient for travelers, but there is a huge opportunity cost for locating an airport here. We are in the Northeast Corridor, so a lot of the flights that run out of Logan should be trains, and this is like 2,400 acres close into downtown of one of our most expensive cities. So my thought is, just put the next 100 or 200,000 housing units you're gonna add to the Boston metro area at Logan, and move the airport to like Foxborough. There's plenty of space, and no one likes that football team anyway. And while you're at it, put in a useful regional rail service like the RER that goes to Charles de Gaulle, which is an enormous airport, but it's located way on the edge of the Ile-de-France. I mean, as someone who loves to visit Paris, I'd like to get into the city faster, but not at the expense of disrupting the urban fabric of possibly the world's most beautiful city. The whole history of Paris is so interesting from an urban design perspective. If you're a fan of the City Beautiful channel, and who isn't, there's a video about Paris and how the boulevards were developed during the Industrial Revolution. The boulevards themselves aren't my favorite part of the city. I mean, I kind of enjoyed the parts that avoided the wrecking ball in the 19th century, but the whole history of how Paris was modernized during that period, including how the 6 train stations that exist today were originally constructed in a 12-year period, is just a lot of fun. How Boulevards Changed Paris Forever from City Beautiful's Great Cities series is a Nebula original. And it's another great example of Nebula creators being able to take a big idea and bring it to a higher level of finish than they'd have been able to do on their own. Nebula is a platform that's owned by us, the creators, so when you sign up, remember you're helping support a platform that, by its very nature, supports all of us in a long-term structural way, financially, professionally, and creatively. So if you want to support this channel's ability to grow and infect more people's brains, signing up for Nebula is a great way to do that, but definitely sign up because the content is good. You do get Nebula classes with your subscription, and here's one I was in dire need of. Being Yourself on Camera from Luria Petrucci, who's kind of a live streaming genius. And if you've been watching this channel long enough, you know if there's one thing I need help with, it's just being a compelling human being on camera. We can all use help being more human sometimes. So if you sign up for Nebula using my custom link down in the description, you will get all of the Nebula content, including classes, for just $250 a month, which is 40% off the usual price. It's a ton of value for a pretty reasonable dollar amount, and you'll be supporting the channel in a way that really makes a difference. And if you were watching on Nebula, you'd be seeing a version of this video that does not have a Nebula promo in it. Just throwing that out there. And that's all I've got. Thanks for joining today, and thanks to the patrons for your generous direct support, as always. I am trying to get organizations to pay me to come to their cities, but it never seems to cover all the costs, so the direct support really does help. Keep the great topic suggestions coming. I do have Seattle content coming next Wednesday, and I'll see you then.